I think she's right, because in fact on the rural areas it's totally different situation than in the big cities when we have buses, trams, we have also trains, yeah, within the city. What the key issue in that situation is, like, we have to provide public transport also to the small towns and rural areas, yeah. So the people that live there have the opportunity to get to the bigger city or to the capital of the region just by bus, preferably electric bus, or because it's not always possible by train. Yeah, we know that it's limited possibilities for the train stations. However, from each even tiny town or village in each country, there should be the bus that goes to the bigger city when we have the train station.
I'd say the argument about how people have different needs is very, very valid. And I completely agree with that. We really have to be careful with transportation, not to have a blanket approach that says that everybody is in the same boat. Also, can I say, if you try and do that at a national policy level, that's exactly when you run into problems, as we found repeatedly, where a price has been put onto fuel. People in rural areas, farming communities rise up in resistance. That's exactly what happened in France and Gilets jaunes. So at the same time, though, the issue of fairness is really, really important. People want it to be fair. People respond to the language of fairness. We can talk about climate change not being fair. We can talk about we can talk about how we need a just transition. We need to be fair to people. So I'm always in favor of using the language of fairness, and we have to be very clear that climate policies will be fair. And I think in this case, it means recognizing that people in rural areas need a different treatment. Yeah. At the same time, personally, I see no reason at all why an able-bodied, fit, younger person in a town or city needs a car. End of chat. And the only reason that they have one is actually usually is because it's a statement of their status, and because it's seen as being a cool thing to have. So we should really challenge that.
It's a question that I guess each time with the election in the cities, yeah, it's very valid. The thing is that the transport, first of all, has to be on time, has to be clean, has to be reliable. I think it's not the price that is causing that people are not using public transport, for example, in the cities or between cities, but because they cannot trust that it will be on time and they will get from point A to point B exactly at the time frame what they want and in a good condition. I think public transport should be available also by prices, and we have, for example, very nice idea in the city of Vienna when they introduced 1 year ticket for all the public transport within the city, and it's quite cheap comparing to when you buy it monthly or, you know, just single tickets for each trip. So I think the mechanism to encourage people to use public transport by making the prices lower, it's good, yeah, because when you buy 1 year ticket and then you have, should I go by car or use public transport? Oh, I already invested in this ticket, so let's take the tram.
We have to tip the balance in favor of not having a car. That means we have to either make having a car harder and more expensive. That might be through a fuel tax, that might be through controlling parking spaces, it might be from controlling how people can move around on roads, for example, and we need to make public transport easier and more accessible. And money is one aspect of that, and there's many different forms of it. And whatever shifts the balance, I'm not persuaded that making it free automatically is where the shift comes. And I think it's the balance between the two. So it may be you could very well actually have more people using public transport simply by making it harder for people to park their cars, or somewhat more expensive. I mean, in Singapore, car ownership is very low because it's simply impossibly expensive to have a car unless you're very rich. I don't favor that. It's about a mix of policies. What I would say, though, is do not assume that money is the primary motivator, and it's the main reason that people continue to have cars, even when there is excellent public transport, is because it's a statement of their status and their identity and their class. Many people feel that public transport is a lower class activity. There's around 20% of women who never use public transport because they feel it's unsafe. There are quite a lot of issues to address here. And cost is not in itself the primary motivation. I lived for a while in Belgium, in Brussels, a city which had fantastic public transport. I was deeply shocked that my work colleagues were still driving to work, even when they had a tram going past their front door and dropping off outside the office. Why? Because they loved their car. So we have to, in the end, address this issue of making public transport feel like something that people do. They do it because it's who they are. They look at cars and they go, why the hell would I have that? I'd much prefer to have the money. I'd much prefer to have the freedom of public transport, the time to read a book, all of these things, much more than a package. And that might very well not be about money. And I might add on that, it might be in one of these weird converse ways that making public transport free makes it less appealing, because it makes it seem like something that poor people do. And that if you've got the money, you show you have the money by having a car. It could be conversely reinforcing.
I mean, in the city centers, I think the key idea is that the parking slots should be expensive. So that would be the tool that discourages people to go to the city center by car. We should develop the whole system or park and drive. So, for example, when you have no possibility to get from the small town to the big city, you just go to the first train station or big bus station in the city, leave your car on the parking and switch into public transport or a bike, yeah, because I think bike is a bike or the other means of communication used by singular people are actually the thing that might change our cities in terms of transport, yeah, they eco-friendly. And quite often when we have the good infrastructure, for example, for bike lines, using bike is much quicker than using bus or especially using an individual car.
I'm a Londoner. We pioneered one of maybe the first congestion charge. It has been successful in reducing congestion in the centre of the city. What has also been powerful about that has been taking some of the revenue from that and putting that into public transport, which has become immensely better. It's still far too expensive, but immensely better in London. Overall pricing policy is quite good. However, it has not, in the end, stopped people from driving their cars into London. It has reduced the total level of driving, but it hasn't stopped it. Some people are still locked into the car economy. Some people will still have a car regardless of how expensive you make it. And I think that this is one tool. I will say that where I think congestion charge becomes very powerful is when it's combined with anti-pollution rules, as a way of, as we're now seeing around the world, with congestion charges and controls on the kind of pollution vehicle you can bring in, because that can be really transformative. I worry though always with these kind of heavy state intervention policies. They are very top heavy. They're very expensive to run, and we run here into a conflict between a more conservative attitude, which sees cars and personal transport as the ultimate expression of personal freedom, and a more left-wing perspective, which sees the state as playing a key role in controlling and managing social goods. And I worry when you get a conflict of ideology, because where we need to get to is a place in the middle where we can say, actually, we're all different, but we can work together and agree on this. So for me, it feels an ideological battleground, which I think is part of a mix, but definitely not the whole answer.